Hi, my name is CJ and this is my RC channel. Well, I'm in the process of getting the electronics done, soldering things up. The motor is mounted and sensor cable is getting routed, so I need to take the positive and negative power leads and attach a male connector, figure out the right length so that the cable is going to be, you know, reasonably snug. I don't want like a big loop or something like that. I want it to, but I don't want it like cramping things either. Fortunately, this whole section of the chassis is rigid, so the wires don't have to be loose. Now, these three wires that go to the motor, the A, B, and C connections, those are going to need to be handled a little differently. I'm probably going to run them around the side of the body post out here, like this, and then kind of make a loop like that so that they all connect here. That way there's some slack. It won't impinge on the body moving, I mean the chassis moving and flexing left and right. It's not going to pull on the wires, or the wires aren't going to like act as a damper in themselves. You need to be careful about that, especially when you've got pan type chassis where part of the chassis rotates. So this is all just, you know, soldering 101. Hopefully you understand that. ESC was easy enough to mount over here. I have switched the location, so I'm going to have to take a few things off so I can access the bolt under here, and relocate the antenna wire over to the hole on this side of the chassis, so that I can have the antenna wire here. And I've already cut a hole in the body. The body I'm starting to paint. I decided to go with the original Tamiya body first. I'm probably just going to go with the wider version of it and not do the stick-on parts, or at least not all of them, just the necessary ones, like the air intake behind the driver, the air scoop. So I had to lengthen my servo wire, and so I just did that very methodically. I had an extra piece of, basically this was an extension, a servo wire extension, but it was like a foot long. So I had a shorter one, but it was a very thin wire. It's for micro servos, and I didn't want to run the kind of current that I'm going to want to run for this servo. It's going to draw a lot. So I wanted to use a thicker wire, so I took that extension, cut a piece of it, and then just methodically did it, you know, one wire at a time to make, because this isn't colorized. The Savox servo, the wire's all black, so I just identified on the connector which was the ground, and then did, you know, ground, red, and then up to the red for power, and then signal. And used a little bit of heat shrink tube on each of the solders, and then a large piece of heat shrink over the grouping. It's a little bulky and ugly, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be, you know, artful. It's just got to reach over here to get to the receiver. This is a really handy item if you do soldering and you do not have a set of, I forget what this is called. I think it's called a third hand or something like that. But it is definitely a third and fourth hand, and it's a very handy item. I just wish they had a more delicate set of clips, something like with a rubber or grommet on there, that because when you're working with thin insulated wire, the clips can be kind of devastating. They'll crimp it up and tear into it and stuff like that. Again, the issue is not having influence over the suspension. So I was trying to tuck these wires out of the way. Okay, there we go. So we have these three wires, and together they do have a certain amount of force, especially if you put a bend in them. They want to, you know, unbend, and then they don't want to collapse further. So you don't want to create a damping force with the wires, so you want to keep them somewhat loose. It may be possible to just route them something like this, where they're inside. I don't want them resting right on the can of the motor, so like that might not be bad right there. Of course, the body's gotta, you know, you don't want the body getting in the way there, and that is right near where the body narrows out, so it might be better to run them like this on this side of the body post. That's a more direct route. Running them inside kind of creates an S, almost a double S, because you've got this bend here, then you've got a bend here, then you're bending back around. So this is probably the best way to go. And I might even like put a little twist tie around here just to keep this point solid, and then have this point here be the flexible, you know, give them enough slack in this direction so that they've got, they're not being tugged on if the suspension, you know, rotates hard to one way or the other, because it is going to do this from time to time. So not to that extreme, but I think you guys get the picture of what I'm trying to say to you at this point, hopefully. Then I've got to do things like, you know, neaten this thing up. The capacitor, I don't know why it's on such a long lead. What I'll probably do is just let it follow one of the wires, and then, you know, like do a little zip tie right here, or a piece of twisty tie, and just keep it loose, like right there, like that. It's not going to go anywhere. It's inside a big cavity in the body, so it's not going to impede on anything. Then I've got to figure out switch location. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that yet, but definitely going to put it somewhere. So, because it's not removable, it's a permanent resident. The wires come right out the side of the. Oh, anyway, it's better to. I like having the switches anyway. You know, some vehicles I've had, you just, you know, plug in a battery, but then it can be, you know, sometimes it's difficult to get, you know, under the body, and that's one of the things with the F1s is the bodies are real tight, so you literally have to take the body completely off every time you wanted to do that, and that's kind of a pain. I like to be able to pick the car up off the side of the track and just flip a switch and turn it right off, save whatever battery power's left, that kind of thing. And also just not have a live system that I'm holding on to. So anyway, I'm gonna kind of show you step by step as I'm going. I'm not gonna show you me soldering wires. That's kind of boring for you guys, so I'll just tell you what I'm planning to do, and then show you what actually got done, because sometimes I change my mind in process. And then, you know, forward as I do these various things, I've got to do the battery connection. That's my race packs from this weekend going through their discharge, or excuse me, the storage mode. I highly recommend that you guys do that. If you have a charger that has a storage mode, and if you don't, I recommend getting a higher end charger that does have that option, because there is a specific voltage that you can charge your batteries to that is the optimum level for making your batteries last long term. So definitely do that. And so, because I always, you know, go to the track with all my batteries charged, ready to go. That way I need to do the minimum amount of charging along the way. But you know, when I come home, I've got a handful of fully charged packs on hand. Usually some of them are partially run down. And I always run them through a storage cycle, because I may not go the following weekend. It could rain for a month, and then the batteries just sit either fully charged or partially discharged or almost all the way discharged. And that's how your batteries go bad. So, you know, good thing to remember. Just trying to give you guys as many little tips along the way as I can. I don't know what any of your levels of experiences are, and I try to you know, I guess speak to the less experienced person and give them the most information I can. So if you've got tons of experience and you've been racing for years, you know, please bear with. Thank you. Things are proceeding really well. I went ahead and soldered up the leads and the connector for the batteries. It's just a standard Dean's connector. I mounted my power switch right over here on the other side of, there's a tab over here. You'll remember we put foam on the inside of that for the battery, so it moves with the speed controller when it rockers over to let the battery slide in. It really doesn't need a lot of room. The battery slides in quite easy. I'll demo that in a moment. I went ahead and soldered up the leads for the motor, to show you how nice and clean that is. Soldering is really easy if you take your time and do it right. What you want to do is first tin either the connector or the wire, doesn't matter. I did one at a time. I could describe this in a better way. Okay, one thing you could do is tin all three wires and then tin all three connectors. I wanted to minimize the amount of heat I was transferring through the motor's connectors into the motor's internal circuit board. There's not a lot in there, but there is some circuitry in there. And heat is not good for a circuit. So to prevent this from overheating, I would tin one motor connector, tin one wire, and then join the two of them together, and then start again tinning a wire, tinning a connector, joining them, etc. Just to kind of slow that process instead of heating all three, you know, one right after another to tin all three. I was worried that might be a little too much. So anyway, just, you know, precautions. You tin the wire, you tin the connector, and then basically I would hold the soldering iron on the connector, getting that solder liquid again, and then put the wire onto the connector and transfer the tip of the soldering iron onto the top of the wire, thus melting the wire and the already heated up solder that is on the connector also helps that melting process, and they all kind of melt together, and you remove the soldering iron and boom, you've got a very nice clean solid joint where you're going to get, you know, proper electrical current through. And part of making good solders is heating the item up enough to accept the solder. In other words, if you just touch the tip of the soldering iron to one of those metal connectors like this, and then let me see if I can get this close enough. If you hold it, you know, like this and put solder against the iron, the solder is going to melt, but it's not going to really stick to the connector. You want to lay the tip down angle-wise onto the connector, getting as much contact surface, transferring as much heat as quickly as possible, and then touch the solder to the edge of the metal of the connector itself instead of the soldering iron. And it'll melt there and wick into the metal, you know, onto that flat surface. And because otherwise it just beads up and it doesn't really stick there, and you don't get a good solder. You've got to have heated up the metal of the connector enough for the solder to adhere properly. And that's why you want to tin each one first, because you make sure that you've got a good solder connection, and then once you heat them together and join them, you're guaranteed getting a nice solid connection that is going to transfer electricity properly and as efficiently as possible. So there we go. I've got the wires all run. I don't even need to put anything over here. That once the body comes down, they'll just sit underneath the body like that. I ran the wire for the switch around the back side here so as not to have to try to twist tie the wire or something like that. Did a little put a few twists in this wire just to take up the slack so it wouldn't be bouncing around, and as you know, I had to extend the servo lead. So it's looking 90% done, and there's only a few more little things. If you notice, I did move the antenna over. You might want to decide before you install this, but if you've done it on one side and you realize you want your receiver on the opposite side, there is a matching hole below here on the board. You can stick a wrench in and undo the old screw and then stick a wrench in. You can't pass the screw through, so you've kind of got to reach in the side, kind of flip this little paddle over like that and reach in with the screw to get it onto the end of your Allen wrench. But it wasn't difficult to do. So now the antenna is over here where the receiver is, so that makes it nice and functional. So let me demonstrate the battery. Basically, you just flip this side over here. You don't even necessarily need to move the other side, maybe just a teeny bit, and the battery just works, goes right in. You want to, when you're at this point, you want to push it over like this and then push it backwards. I also like to feed the balance cable in back here behind the servo, and then you take the restraining key, slide your battery to center, and set it down on top and push the pins into either side of this, and they go right through those little slots there, and this will be attached. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't even jiggle around. It's a very nice system. So anyway, to get the battery out, just pull it forward about a ½ inch, cock it sideways and slide it right on out. Everything kind of moves out of the way for you. And then you can slide stuff back. So now I've got a little issue here that I want to deal with. It's not a huge problem. Oh, I haven't run my balance cable yet. Still need to do that. In any event, if you'll notice, looking at the front end here, there's a lot of down angle on the steering rods, and ideally those should be fairly close to horizontal. So I was checking through the instructions in the servo mounting section to see if I had done something improperly, and the only thing I see that I could have done differently, they recommend a 30mm space if you're running a servo that's pointed up and down instead of flat, and I am a little short on that measurement. One nice thing about having a set of calipers is you can measure things that are kind of odd, because you have this piece that comes out the bottom of a caliper, and you can use that to measure with. So you just slide that down and then measure to where the center of that servo is. And it says I've got 30.42. The 0.42 could be me, not having this thing lined up exactly. I mean, ½ a millimeter is a very small amount, but I'm in the, if anything, I'm over the height. So I'm going to drive it as is and see how the handling goes, but it does seem to me that these are a little extremely down, and they're only going to move up when the suspension, is lifted. That angle becomes more acute, and I don't see that as a positive thing for the steering geometry. So at some point I may raise the servo a ¼ inch, maybe 3/16, enough to get a little less angle to kind of straighten those out a little bit, because when I look at some of the other servo mounting arrangements, they don't show you any actual photos, but if I had located this flat with the steering facing forward, So the servo would be, you know, 90 degrees this way, 90 degrees that way, 90 degrees this way. So the steering is coming out the front of the servo. You wouldn't have anywhere near that extreme angle, even if this thing was flat, and it's a really short servo, if that was flat to the chassis. So I'm not sure. I may tinker. I may relocate the servo to that configuration. I don't know. I'm going to see how it handles. If it handles really well and I'm happy with it, the way it drives, great. I'm not going to leave it alone. I'm going to leave it alone. If I've got a good generic setup, you know, properly adjusted toe and things like that, I'm going to go to that as one of my first things to change. Now, I do have some mods on order. They're going to take a little while to get here because they're coming from Hong Kong, but one of them replaces these upper A-arms with adjustable linkages, and that allows to adjust the camber and caster dynamically, or not dynamically. It's not going to happen on the fly like you have an adjustment on your radio, but this is a fixed setup. The only way you can change camber or caster is to remove this block, and you only get like a half a degree of change, and only in one direction. And changing this block is kind of a pain in the neck. You got to pop off the balls here and here, here and here. You got to take out the hardware here, 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 and here. You got to take these big screws out from below, spin it, and then put it all back together. Whereas if you've got an adjustable, basically it's like a turnbuckle here and a turnbuckle here, you just put a few cranks on that turnbuckle, a few cranks on this turnbuckle, and bingo, you've adjusted camber and caster. So I'm really looking forward to those. Really looking forward to those coming in. It was about $11 for the kit. There's a couple different kits that allow you to do that. This looked like a decent one, and it was less expensive than the more elaborate, more photogenic model, if you will. But any of them are going to work basically the same, and it looked like it's going to be as strong as either. So I went ahead and got the $11 model, and I'm running with that. Now there is another kit by the company that makes the nicer one, and I may put some links to all of these mods when I do the mod section on this. It actually replaces the lower arms as well. It gets rid of this block. It has lower arms that are on actual kingpins, so they pivot. So instead of having springs in here, you've got small diagonal shock absorbers that have their own springs and their own adjustabilities. And one thing that the front end does not have is damping. So that would be interesting to try, but you know, that's $90 right there. And if you're going to do all of those mods, why not buy, you know, an X-Ray or one of the high-end F1s to begin with? This is kind of a budget experiment. So if $10 worth of replacement linkages here to get rid of this plastic A-arm and have something that's adjustable to give me toe and camber for $11, that sounds like a winner to me. And so that's what I'm going to start with, and we'll see where this goes. I'm not racing this at a competitive level. This is just club racing, having fun. I like to do well at the same time. You know, I'm not getting, you know, you're not getting any trophies out of this. This is just, you know, bragging rights amongst your buddies. So I just want to have a good time. But I do like to tinker and experiment and see what, you know, see if I can improve the existing kit and, you know, tune the car to drive well. So that's where I'm going from. In any event, let's see what's left to do. I've been painting the body. I'm not doing any videos on that. It's just, you know, rattle can spray painting. I'm not doing anything fancy. Just doing a two-color paint job. Just the lower deck black, and the body is a single color. And I'm going to probably go ahead and use the stickers that come with the kit. You know, I recommend bright colors. It makes it easier to see your car, and these cars are pretty small, but you know, do as you will.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.